it was another moose, and it was his rack moving in the woods, and it was just so massive. Biggest I'd ever seen, and truth be said, biggest anyone's ever seen, it being the state record and all. So I asked the hunter, I said, are you willing to go after this moose? Because he was in a position where we couldn't shoot him from there, couldn't engage him. And he said, whatever you want to do. And that was the music to my ears, right? So where I'm going with the physical conditioning and the sustainability is we had to walk a quarter mile, which not that far, but it was a duck walk in an old culvert washout. So we would stay below the brush and be able to get around to get a shot on this trophy. And that 81-year-old man was a stud. I mean, he stayed in that position the entire way, never took a break. That lactic acid was building up in the quads and the hamstrings, and he powered through and got himself in a position where he was able to make that shot and make history ultimately.
These are stories of outdoor adventure and expert advice from folks with calloused hands. I'm James Nash, and this is the Six Ranch Podcast. The Six Ranch Podcast is brought to you by SIG Sauer. SIG is a leading provider and manufacturer of firearms, electro-optics, ammunition, air guns, and suppressors. For over 250 years, SIG Sauer Inc. has evolved and thrived by blending American ingenuity, German engineering, and Swiss precision. Today, SIG Sauer is synonymous with industry-leading quality and innovation, which has made it the brand of choice amongst the U.S. military, the global defense community, law enforcement, competitive shooters, hunters, and responsible citizens. SIG Sauer is also a premier provider of elite firearms instruction and tactical training at the SIG Sauer Academy located in New Hampshire. For more information about SIG Sauer and its complete line of products, visit sigsauer.com. We're out here with Dustin Parent. You just got home from the SIG Hunter Games, and you were a range safety officer. But your role, like your jobs, you're a busy guy. You're all over the place. What do you do?
I am a very busy guy, and I'll tell you, the opportunity I had to be out in Wyoming with the SIG Hunter Games was awesome. I was very proud and honored to be part of that. As far as what I do, my main focus is my law enforcement career. I'm in my 19th year. I work for a town here in central New Hampshire on Lake Winnipesaukee. Really enjoyed that. I've had the opportunity to run a patrol narcotics dog for 10 years of that career. That was cool. It opened a lot of doors to me to travel throughout New England and meet some great people when I was doing that. I also took my career in the role of SWAT. So I was an operator for about 10 years, then team leader, and now I'm the commander of that team. So we're a 26-man operation. We also have support staff such as CNT, negotiations, and I'll tell you, it's definitely a little overwhelming at times as starting a family and running my outfitter business as well here in northern New Hampshire and western Maine.
Well, before we get into the outfitting stuff, this is extremely hard times to be in law enforcement, and then maybe even harder. I don't know. For SWAT and some of those direct action units. And I want to personally say thank you for all the absolute crap that you've had to endure over the last couple of years. I know it's not easy, and you guys are staying out there and being professional. I can't thank you enough for that.
Well, I appreciate that, and I'll certainly pass that along to my brothers and sisters, and I thank you for the service you did in the military. So kudos as well.
Thanks for that. Tell me about your outfitting business.
So I own Northern New England Outfitters with my brother. My brother's 10 years older than me. We started, this is our 20th season. So I was pretty young when we started. Like I said, he's 10 years older, so he was a little more established. But, it started with kind of a cool story where we grew up in northern New Hampshire, and we're doing some bird hunting and came across a gentleman that had a moose tag and was struggling. And he asked, had we seen any moose? And the two of us kind of looked at each other like, who hasn't? And he asked if we would help him, and we did, and it was pretty cool because he handed us $500 as like a thank you, and the light bulb went off. And 20 years later, we're grown to be a pretty successful larger outfitter business, especially for New England.
I love that, man. I guided for a long time before I ever like started a business to become an outfitter. And when I did, I had $600 to start the business with. And it started out with just fly fishing. And I actually got loaned some fishing rods from Winston, the fly fishing company there in Southwest Montana. And if they hadn't done that, if they hadn't been willing to like loan me a couple used rods that they had lying around, I never could have gotten started. And then it grew into what it is now, which is great. But awesome. It's so fun to start with like really humble and honest origins and then build something out of it.
Yes, it's my brother and I have come from different walks of life, given he's technically my half brother. We share the same father. Therefore, we didn't grow up in the same home per se, but definitely different walks, especially because he was so much older than me. But he does it full time. So this is the only thing he does. And I do it full time, yet have a full-time law enforcement career. So it can be tiresome, but I'll tell you what, the benefits are fantastic. You meet some amazing people that are like-minded and share the passion for hunting and fishing. So I'm thankful for it every day, for sure.
What species do you guide for?
We focus primarily on moose, bear, deer, and turkey. It's tough out here because our moose is by far the most fun animal to guide for, but it's all lottery and auction driven. With that said, being as established as we are for as long as we have the opportunity to take a lot of the auction hunters out. So we're doing okay with it.
And for the folks that don't know, every state has some kind of auction tag that, you can basically buy your way into. And I will say that the outfitters that consistently end up with those auction hunters are the best outfitters available in the state, because typically people who are buying auction tags, they're not folks that are as worried about money as everybody else. So they go and they get the absolute best, and that's you. So that's awesome.
No, I appreciate that. I have tended to see that as well, and not just in our own outfit, but other outfits. And, those people, they come with a certain stigma, and I find it to not be always true. Yes, they have money, but they do love hunting for the most part. I'm not saying that there's not that one person that doesn't fit the role, but they're such great people. They made right decisions in their life. They have a lot of money, but they share that passion the same that we do. Just they fly in on a jet and we drive. That's all.
Yeah. I think I think that there's nothing wrong with that at all. I actually fly on jets quite a bit. It just happens to be with like 200 or 300 of my friends every time I go. Touche. So what does a moose hunt in Maine look like?
So we run moose hunts in 3 states, Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont. Originally, I started in New Hampshire, did that predominantly, I'd say this is my 7th year in Maine, so the first 13 years. And there used to be a couple thousand tags, and now there's 50. So they've decreased it significantly due to concerns with the ticks, winter tick. However, Maine, much larger state, denser population. 7 years ago, we found that to be the direction to go to sustain our business the way that we are accustomed to. And then Vermont with the same thing. They're kind of a supplemental state, if you will, for moose hunting. But we run 2 different seasons. So we have September season, which is really cool because it's a rut season. They take place predominantly in the north part. So I'll guide in zone 1, which is up on the Canadian border. That zone is just massive amounts of land. There's no commercial at all. There's no buildings. It's just complete Great North Maine woods, where hundreds and hundreds of miles of logging roads, owned mostly by Irving and some state land, but mostly by Irving. So that September hunt consists of, showing up. You can do a spike camp. I try to find these cabins to have the hot shower and provide these amenities that most people are accustomed to on their hunts. But you can certainly count on getting an up close and personal encounter that time of year up in northern Maine. We are, we're pulling moose into, 10 to 15 yards sometimes coming in, looking to mate. So it's a lot of fun. The second season is in October, and that's down where our lodge is located in western Maine, northern New Hampshire. And that's more hunting the old logging wood yards and old, I guess, I don't want to say like fields, because they're not fields at all. They're more like plots of land where they logged it and then it grew up into what the moose are feeding on, because they're trying to put some weight back on from having been in the rut for that last 4 weeks. So that's more of a spot and stock and basically putting miles on in that October hunt.
And you run a lot of bear hunts as well, right?
Yeah, we have about 40 bait sites. We're running approximately 70 hunts a year. We offer 2 states, so Maine and New Hampshire. That I found throughout the country, people are thinking North Carolina, Jersey, those are your real big bears. For us, not to say we don't have the big ones, 500-600 pounds, but you're a good bear for us, 200-300 pounds is a nice black bear for us in Maine, New Hampshire.
And that's a great bear. Like that's very representative of the species. And even on the top end, like as far as like being honest about a bear's size, there's only a handful of bears in the state of Oregon that are in that 300-pound range. And right. I know you guys have exceeded that a lot of times. Running 40 baits, that is a gargantuan amount of work. I don't think people understand how much work that is.
It truly is. And we've expanded our team since we've started, and Maine is pretty accommodating when it comes to allowing us to hire people to help us, if you will. Being out west, I feel like I'm grabbing the lingo and calling them ranch hands. My experience at the Queen Mountain Lodge, but these guys are great, and we couldn't do it without them for sure. Because as you know, that amount of bait, I mean, you got to tend to them at least every third day, depending on how active they are. But they all have cameras, and they're all upkept for sure. Some of them have a tree stand, some of them have a blind. But it is an immense amount of work. There's no doubt about it. It takes probably 6 full days to get everything up and running before the season starts.
Now, when we were out there in Wyoming and you were telling me about these bear hunts, there's one thing you told me that I'm honestly still a little bit upset about, and that is how ridiculously cheap you are. And I don't even want to say, I'm gonna link to your website and stuff, but like it is less expensive to go bear hunting with you than it is for somebody to go fishing in Montana. It's really, really affordable.
It is, and we know it. That's the thing that can be frustrating, is we do know it, because we're grabbing people from all over the place that share their experiences, and we've kind of taken and amended our model with moose hunting. And the reason we can do that is those tags are once in a lifetime, right? So we're able to market ourselves and help people understand that we are different than the other outfitter, right? And this is why, and we're not afraid to show them and help them understand. But when it comes to bear hunting in Maine, it's a very popular thing amongst the outfitter community, and they're just not charging any. We have to compete, so they're not charging the prices that most hunters throughout the country are used to seeing. So in order to stay in business, we have to compete with them, and it kind of just falls into is what it is category, unfortunately.
Well, look, I respect that you're giving people a great opportunity there that's, really available to a lot of hunters. And just to put it into perspective, like an elk tag in Wyoming, just the tag is going to be pretty close to a guided bear hunt with you. And I really encourage people to look into it. It's something that like I'm really going to try and find time in my schedule to get out there, because I want to hunt with you now that I've got to spend some time with you. I think it's just great. A tremendous opportunity. Okay. So you come from this elite law enforcement background, SWAT, all of that, the leadership aspect of that. You've got a tremendous amount of experience within within your role as a guide and an outfitter. And you're also an instructor at the SIG Sauer Academy. And then you come out to Wyoming to be a range safety officer for the first ever SIG Sauer Hunter Games. With all that experience, I feel like you're the perfect person to talk to and tell me about how this event went. And I guess let's explain a little bit like what the format was and who was on your team.
Yeah, like I said when you first introduced me, I was just so flattered and honored to go out there and be a part of that. I could tell, although it being the first Hunter Games, just by the format and the manner in which SIG Sauer goes about doing their business, it was very clear and obvious that this was going to be an outstanding event. And it was exactly that. It was the right amount of challenging. It was, I guess, the perfect crowd, the perfect group, and then all the leadership that was on the top, making sure that this went the direction it was supposed to go, was a home run for sure. It was awesome. Daniel Horner, he's a stud, right? There's no way around that. The man is amazing, and the work he put into setting up this course. I believe we were at about 7.3 miles, 10 different stages throughout the mountains out behind Queen Mountain. And there were some challenging areas where it needed to be challenging for sure. And then there were some areas where, it kind of, you got a break for a minute. So it was a perfect mix for sure.
Okay, cool. So who was on your team?
So I was blessed with the presence of Cowboy Cerrone, the UFC fighter. He is the all-time winningest UFC fighter. And I'll tell you what, he is a card. He is an awesome guy to be around. I had so much fun, and I'm not sure I ever laughed that much in the woods. I just had such a great time hanging out with him. I had the strength and conditioning coach, one of the top strength and conditioning coaches in the UFC, Bo Sandoval. He's also a stud, man. He's got such a great personality, and he was a breath of fresh air to be around, because coming from the outside, and I say as a commoner myself, these guys are in the spotlight quite often, and it was unexpected what it was going to be like, and I was blown away by their humility for sure. They were great guys. Our elite guide, was Mike Kimmel, the Python Cowboy out of Florida. The fact that there's a man out there that makes a living wrestling pythons and shooting iguanas is fascinating to me. So this guy had my attention right away before I even met him. And he is absolutely the real deal for what he does. He is super knowledgeable, very enthusiastic, and he was a great asset to the team for sure. We had a good time.
So there's definitely a connection between Cowboy Cerrone and Bo Sandoval. Bo's trained Cowboy, and he's trained a lot of UFC fighters, knows how to speak that language. But throwing Trapper Mike into the mix there, that's kind of a curveball. That's way outside of what he normally does. And then, so how did they come together as a team? Mike is sort of in the role as one of SIG Elite guides. So he's the guy that we've trained with this rifle and stuff like that. But Cowboy has hunted, and Bo, I think, has hunted and has shot a little bit. So how did that all come together? What was that team dynamic like?
And I felt the same way. So prior to going out to Wyoming for the Hunter Games, I did my research and was trying to figure out what that dynamic was going to be like the best I could based on the research I could find on the internet. But none of that was able to prepare me for how it actually played out, truth be told. So these guys, we're talking one of the most badass UFC fighters of all time, right? And then there's Python Cowboy. Yeah, he wrestles pythons, but this can be an intimidating duo, if you will. But they fell together, man. I'll tell you, it wasn't long, and they were setting up trips to go hunting with each other, and the camaraderie when they were participating in this event, just working with each other, making sure they were each squared away, and how to be successful making the shots, sharing information. They were just, they didn't miss a beat. these guys are going to be friends for life. There's no doubt about it. I mean, I saw them exchange information and setting up trips to go down there and shoot iguanas on golf courses. That's something that Cowboy is interested in for sure. And the other thing that I would like to mention is Cowboy, he's such a cool dude. Like he has camps for kids at his ranch, the BMF Ranch in New Mexico. He's got something going on pretty soon here, and you have to look at his Instagram for the exact details. But I just thought it was really cool. He's doing like a shooting camp and a summer camp for kids, and him and Mike were talking about that together on how they can kind of collaborate something in the future to do it together. So definitely some camaraderie being had out there during the Hunter Games.
So how did it go on the course of fire? Because the way we place these targets, they're not easy to find. You've got to hunt for these targets. Yes.
So their plan, which I thought was pretty effective actually, was they were going to set up, and I'm not sure what the audience knows for as far as the layout for the Hunter Games, but how it works is there's 10 stages. There was a green flag at the beginning of the stage. Once you got the okay by means of a cannon going off, you could advance past this green flag. There was another flag, and there were various distances on each of the stages, and that flag was red, and you couldn't advance past that. So you were able to walk and search for your targets within the two flagged areas. So they broke up those areas into thirds and looked for their target. Once the target was located, they decided that Mike was going to be the first shooter. Python Cowboy, Hunter, Trapper Mike, however we're referring to him, he was our first shooter. We found him. He was going to be our strongest link to the team. So he set up, got ready, figured out what position that he and the rest of the team were going to shoot in, whether it be kneeling, standing, prone, whatever the particular rules, allowed them to do on that particular course of fire. And then Bo and Cowboy would proceed into the latter 2/3 of that flagged area and try to find the remaining targets that were there.
And then how did that go? Were they able to locate those targets pretty quickly, or did they have to really hunt for them?
They did locate them. I can remember two where they struggled a little bit to find them. And I think they located them probably with about 7 minutes left, which meant they had to, get all 18, or as it was, be 9 shots off on this final target within 7 minutes. So they learned quick, because the very first stage of the very first day, none of them shot the second target. None.
Really?
0 shots were fired. Yes. So as the range safety officer, I reminded them of the time that they had left of the 15 minutes. So that's pretty crucial to let our viewers know here that they have 15 minutes to locate and engage all targets. And 2 of the 10 had 3 targets, and the other 8 had 2 targets. And the competitors all had to shoot 3 shots each at each of the targets. So for instance, 2 targets at a stage, that would be 9 shots fired per team at each target, 18 shots total. So on the very first stage, they located the target, and there was a lot of talk about positioning and who was going to go first. So it was a little bit of chaotic there, which ended up with that second target never being engaged at all. So let's just say the walk between stage 1 and stage 2, there was a little more gaming going on between that team. They were gelling up.
Yeah. And I saw you guys when you're leaving stage 1 and going to your stage 2, starting out that first day, and everybody kind of had a look on their face like, this might be harder than what we signed up for. But people got better. Every team got better as it went. They kind of learned where Dan and I were hiding targets. They learned what to look for, and everybody got a lot faster from that point forward.
Yeah, no doubt. And, that was our first 15 minutes together. And I'll tell you, it was super cool to see the competitiveness of Cowboy come out, because he did not accept or like the fact that they ran out of time and did not get to engage that second target. So he kind of took the reins and said, hey, look, this is what we're going to do, and this is how we're going to do it. and they moved forward, and it was pretty cool. The three of them came together quite nicely after that.
What did the targets look like?
So they were various different big game animals. We had anything from sheep to elk to white-tailed deer to mule deer. There was a mountain lion out there. There was muskox, I believe I saw, which was quite funny on an inside story. Stage 3, I believe, had a muskox, and Cowboy saw it and called it as a turkey. So, so the rest of the competition, that was the turkey stage that those guys had to engage that target. So that was pretty funny. There was a few brown bears out there. There was moose out there. There was basically any large game animal that you're going to find in the United States was out there on that course. So it was cool.
And then did they get points for hitting the target anywhere, like at an archery competition, or did they only get points for a specific shot?
That's a great question. And it actually was not like an archery shoot. They weren't the 3D foam targets. They were more of a print, if you will, of the animal. With that said, MGM, I mean, those guys provided the steel, and the steel cutout was as best it could be of the vital area that you would take an ethical shot on a big game animal. So you had a print that was of the animal, very lifelike, and then there was a steel vital shape. There was a vital shaped piece of steel in front of that print that allowed the shooter to know where they were supposed to be aiming. And the one thing you and Daniel did that I thought was really cool was put that red light on the edges of the vitals. So when it was hit, a red light went off and kind of gave that satisfaction along with the noise of the steel being hit. But hey, it's like an arcade game. You made your shot and that light went off. So it was pretty cool.
Something that's always my whole life bothered me about these archery competitions is that they give you some points for hitting something in the butt or the guts or the hoof or whatever. And I don't like that. I feel like that should be negative points, if anything. So something that was really important to me with this event was that you hit something in the lungs or you got nothing on that stage.
Right. No, I think that was well thought out and definitely is a good idea. I agree with that 100%. And the exact format for these hunter games where, as I alluded to, they get 3 shots. That very first shot is worth 3 points. The second shot is worth 2, and the third shot is worth 1. So the shooter, I liked it because it's some of the stages, their heart rate was still up from the trek from stage to stage, but there was also that adrenaline rush of the first shot, the nerves, if you will, right? So you needed to make that first shot in order to get at least 50% of the possible points on that particular stage. So it was well thought out. I liked it a lot.
And by the time it was over after day 2, like the top 4 teams, the top team was up by a bit, but then teams 2, 3, and 4, they were within a handful of points. Like
they were, yeah.
A couple first round impacts changes everything.
There's no doubt about that. There was some pretty skilled competitors out there, and it was fun to watch them at dinner when those score sheets came out. A little bit of trash talking going on for sure, but those guys definitely could feel it. They could feel number 2, number 3, number 4 on their heels. Yeah, like you said, they were up by a little bit, but it was theirs to lose. There's no doubt. You gotta make those shots, and I'll tell you, day 2. We were faced with 25, 30 mile an hour winds on the back side of that course. So it could have went either way. There's no doubt about it.
So from your perspective, do you feel like, this was realistic for hunting as much as it could be within the a competition format? Did they come out here with skills that they can use to become better shooters while they're hunting?
Oh, there's no doubt. That was a lot of the conversation that I had with the team that I had was, a lot of people train just on the range, standing there, maybe on a bench. It's not very realistic, right? So they had to get themselves into positions and use trees and use their pack and just anything that was available to them to get that shot. And that feeling of being timed is a real life thing. So as you know, that animal is not going to stay there all day, right? So you need to be able to have a game plan ahead of time based on the terrain that you're faced with to put yourself in a position where you're going to be as successful as you possibly can be. And that certainly was a lesson that they brought away from that. There's no doubt. I mean, I actually caught sidebar conversations during the trek in between stage to stage on terrain on saying, if there was a target here, they would lay here, they would use this rock. And I thought that was pretty cool because they were starting to apply what they were doing to real life scenarios.
That's awesome, man. I'm really glad to hear that. And that was another one of my goals, is that everybody would come away with this with a better understanding of how to shoot from these dynamic positions, because it is easy to go to the rifle range and just lay down on the bench and make sure your gun's sighted in, everything's working right. And then a lot of guys just throw it in their gun case and leave, and then they go hunting with it. But
right.
there's a skill deficit within hunters, very much so, myself included, about how to build positions. And people within the 3-gun community, within the military sniper community, law enforcement, all that, they get some formal training for how to build positions in weird spots. But hunters,
and sustainability.
Yeah. Hunters really just have to rely on their experience to do that. And chances are they're only shooting in the field once or twice a year, if that. You don't really ever get the breadth of experience that you need to become competent at all these different shooting positions. So I feel like this sort of showed everybody, hey, we've got some room to improve, and this is a step in that direction. I definitely have a lot of room that I need to improve in this category as well.
Oh, there's no doubt, James. I may have had more experience than the people on my team, but to say that I didn't learn anything from them while I watched them fight through these different situations would be false, because I absolutely took something away from watching these guys compete and figure out how to make this work, and stuff that never crossed my mind. Some positions I saw them get in, I was like, hey, that's really cool. I watched them drag the Yeti cooler over to the wood platform on one of the shooting stages because they wanted a place to sit. That's thinking outside the box, right? I was like, hey, it's there, use it, right? So they were definitely open-minded to figure out how to get themselves into a situation or a position that yes, most times dynamic, but is it sustainable? Because they need to get those 3 shots off. And the same thing out in the field, we could be faced with, how many times have you been in an encounter with an animal and dropped to a knee, and it feels like 5 hours you've been sitting there because your leg's asleep and you're just not in a sustainable position. Whereas, have you had that experience, you knew, well, all right, I'm not going to put myself in that situation because I know it's not sustainable for the amount of time I potentially could have to be here.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Me and my buddy Kyle were sneaking up on this pond that had some ducks in it in Montana one time. And we got there with the idea of throwing some decoys out. But we got there a little bit late. It was still dark. And this thing was loaded with birds, hundreds of birds. So we're like, okay, just hold tight and we'll wait until shooting light. And then we're going to jump them and shoot them. And both of us, for some bizarre reason, ended up in like this hunker squat where we were just frozen and these birds could see us. And, we waited 10 minutes and then shooting light, and both of us tried to get up to shoot a shooting light and neither of us could, our legs weren't working anymore. So even something as simple as that, it's like, understand you may have to be in the spot for a while you're waiting for this animal to come out from behind a tree or stand up or do something that affords you a shooting opportunity.
Right. And I'll tell you, the other thing that comes to mind is your physical conditioning, right?
Yeah.
I'll tell you, you tell me that story and it brings back memories. I had the opportunity to guide the all-time state record in New Hampshire at 68.5 inches wide. And
wow.
The hunter, it was, I feel so fortunate to be part of that day. And this guy was an awesome person, a great human being. He was 81 years old. And, we spotted these moose, and a long story very short is we approached up on these moose, and there was a nice trophy out there, and he got set up on his sticks. And as I was glassing for impact, I saw what looked like the forest to move, the entire forest move behind this nice bull. And I'm like, holy cow, man. It was another moose, and it was his rack moving in the woods, and it was just so massive. Biggest I'd ever seen, and truth be said, biggest anyone's ever seen, it being the state record and all. So I asked the hunter, I said, are you willing to go after this moose? Because he was in a position where we couldn't shoot him from there, couldn't engage him. And he said, whatever you want to do. And that was the music to my ears, right? So where I'm going with the physical conditioning and the sustainability is, we had to walk a quarter mile, which not that far, but it was a duck walk in an old culvert washout. So we would stay below the brush and be able to get around to get a shot on this trophy. And that 81-year-old man was a stud. I mean, he stayed in that position the entire way, never took a break. That lactic acid was building up in the quads and the hamstrings, and he powered through and got himself in a position where he was able to make that shot and make history ultimately. So it's certainly something to think about, is conditioning.
That's an amazing story, dude. I'm convinced increasingly that if you want to accomplish something that nobody else has ever done, you have to be able to do things that nobody else is willing to do. And
Jerry Rice, right?
Yeah. And
that's his words.
If you think that duck walking a quarter mile is no dramas, man, carve a little time out of your schedule and go do it and report back, because I think you're going to be crippled before you get there.
Yeah, it's tough for sure.
68.5-inch moose in Maine. Are you kidding me?
That was in northern New Hampshire.
That was in New Hampshire. Wow.
Yeah. 68.5 inches. Huge.
Unbelievable.
Huge.
I mean, I'm going to the Alaska Peninsula moose hunting this year. Those are the biggest moose in the world. If I find a moose that's 68 inches, that's going to be an incredible accomplishment there. Now, we're talking about New Hampshire. That's just amazing.
And the irony behind that statement you made is when I met the hunter that took that moose, that first day in my truck in the morning before light, I said, just to recap, what are your expectations of your hunt? And he said to me, well, I went on an Alaskan Yukon moose hunt and I shot one 68 inches wide. I'd like one bigger than that. And I kind of just looked at him with a pale face, and he's like, he goes, I'm just kidding. And I'm like, oh, thank God. Right.
Yeah.
We don't have many of those. And, 2 days later, we shot one 68.5, and I looked at him and said, oh, it looks like you achieved your goals here, sir. And he was thrilled. So it was cool. I might've been more happy than him, but he was definitely happy.
That's such an amazing thing. And that's an important lesson that guides need to have, is talking with their clients about their expectations. And, I do it all the time, especially with fishing clients, at the truck, in the parking lot. I say, how would you define success today? Because everybody's different. And as a young guide, I just tried to give people the trip that I would want to have. As a more experienced guide, I try to give people the trip that they want. And if they say, you know what, I want to catch a 28-inch rainbow trout today. Like, you know what, that's really cool. There aren't any of those here. So like, let's recalibrate a little bit, because if we didn't have that conversation, they would be wanting that all day long and they would come away disappointed. But now we can kind of start over and be like, okay, this is what we do have. We can try and catch the biggest fish in the river, or we can try and catch the most fish possible, or we can try and work on an aspect of your casting or hook setting or skill, anything like that. But what we cannot do is catch something that does not exist. And I mean, good on you for telling that guy that what he was asking for was impossible. Like, I probably would have said, I'm sorry, that's not going to happen. Like, maybe we should talk about a 50-inch moose.
Right.
But you just said, hey, it's possible, but it's unlikely. And then you went out and did it. That's just an incredible guiding story. I don't think people will really understand just how much pressure that is. Yeah.
I'll tell you where the pressure is when people have those expectations, there's no doubt. And then as a guide, a little look into the guide life, as is when these people start investing the amount of money they do, right? So you have a guy who spent $35,000 on a moose hunt, that's the big leagues, right? You're talking, we need to perform and really get a great understanding of each other of what his expectations are, to kind of echo what you were talking about, and hopefully those conversations are had prior to the first day of the hunt. But I can't say enough, especially having been exposed to Wyoming, because I'm back east, here and there, the physical limitations of the hunter can certainly dictate a lot of times their success, or the size of the animal they get the opportunity at oftentimes too.
Yep, that's very true. The only thing that I would add to that is that a lot of guys work really hard to get in extremely good shape for a Western hunt, and they focus on hiking, on carrying weight. Sometimes they will get to the point where all they want to do is hike. And
right.
And you have to remember that this is a capability, not a necessity. So just because you can hike all day long does not mean you should. One of the hardest things to do for a lot of people is to sit down and stay in one spot and glass all day long, and maybe move 100 yards and do it all over again. But that takes a type of mental conditioning that is also really hard to develop.
Well, it makes sense. And I agree with you 100%. That I think the way you explain that, it couldn't be any better. It's having the ability to do it when it's time is what's crucial. But you need to trust in your guide that they're putting you in the spot where the moose are, because we've already done the homework.
Yeah.
Or in your case, the elk, or whatever it is that the species you're going for. But I agree with that. And I use the phrase a lot with my hunters. I tell them it's a lot like Novocaine. If you give it time, what we're doing will work. You will ultimately be successful, because I've done my homework and we are in their bedroom. We are where they live. And sometimes, like you said, it takes some time. You need to stay there. But should he come out in an area, or that animal come out in an area where we aren't, but we can see them, now that's where that physicality comes in. We need to be able to get there, somewhat double time, or do that, the dreaded duck walk, whatever it might be. But I agree with you wholeheartedly. Just going out there walking aimlessly because you can is not a very sound hunting technique.
Absolutely. Well, okay. So now I need some advice. Getting ready for this moose hunt this fall, what should I be doing physically? Because you're a physical specimen, man. You look like you're carved out of marble. What should I be doing to get ready for this Yukon moose hunt this fall?
So I can only give you the advice that I have experience in. Now, I understand it's going to be different terrain for you. For us, we are hunting, and you can maybe overlap some of the advice for what you're exposed to, but we are walking in a lot of terrain where we call them blowdowns, where the loggers have left the tops of trees. So with that said, that means you need to be able to lift your feet up. You can't shuffle your feet, right? So you need to be able to lift your feet up and actually walk. And that hurts people's hip flexors, hurts their quads, things like that you cannot condition if you're just out walking, right? So I tell people the stair stepper is something that's going to condition them physically to get them ready for what they're going to do. Because let's be honest, if your hip flexors hurt, you're going to be thinking about that. You're not going to be thinking about what you should be thinking about when you're on a hunt of a lifetime like you're doing. So I think there's a lot of value to putting in that work at home so you can enjoy your hunt and be more successful. We talk SIG Sauer, the BDX, right? I know you're going to be running the cross, hopefully in a long action, but you're going to be running the BDX system. That is huge. Now, the amount of time and effort that someone puts into their firearm, because that's the hunter's job, right? Yes, as a guide, I'm making sure that you're not on 30 power when you should be on 2. I will do that. I will check that often. But it's your job to make that shot and understand how your system works. Are you connected? Is your rangefinder connected? Are your Kilo 3000 binoculars connected? That's going to be your job, right? So I understand you're in a situation personally where that's not as much a concern as it might be for the other guy, because you are a SIG ambassador and you're quite savvy with that system. But for anyone else listening that might be going on a hunt and picks up a system like that, let's not make your hunt only the second day that you played with it. That's going to be crucial for sure.
Sure. So have good technical proficiency with whatever gear you bring. And that's a great point. I see guys come out for hunts all the time that have some really Gucci equipment and they don't know how to use it. So it doesn't do any good. Like it's completely useless if you're not familiar with it and comfortable with it. And then, getting hip flexor strong. That's a great point. That's something that I've never really focused on training for a hunt before. And it's something that always hurts on a hunt. That's a really good point.
Yeah. And pay attention to what the guide tells you to bring. There might be something specific, to the area that he's in that is very important. I can think I think of the turkey hunts. I do a lot of turkey hunts with clients, and I'm thinking back to that sustainability in positions, and with your duck story being like, how many times have you been calling a bird or working a bird and the hen comes in first and you got to stay as quiet and still as can be? And, when I had on the gear list, bring your thermocell, right? And the guy didn't bring a thermocell because he says, I'm not affected by bugs. Well, now you're moving and the hen sees you and you lose your opportunity, and it's the same idea. So just be cognizant of what the guide has on his gear list. There's a reason he's telling you to bring it. And the worst case scenario is you don't use it, but at least you have the option if you're faced with a situation that calls for that particular piece of gear.
Yeah, I agree with that piece as well. Like, on these day trips and shorter trips, I tell people to bring weather appropriate clothing, with the hopes that means that they're going to look at the weather and they're going to dress for it for whatever makes them comfortable. But if it's an expedition trip, I'm going to give them the list of all the things that I use specifically for that trip. And I've landed on this list from decades of using the wrong things. And like everything I'm using right now is very much on purpose. Like there's a reason that I said, this jacket, this brand, these boots, like this quality of gear, because less than that can result in a failure that causes the failure of the entire trip.
Yes, I agree. That's spoken from experience. There's no doubt about that. I've had the same thing, and everything I use, there's a reason for it, and I try explaining. I'm fortunate enough to be on the Sitka ambassador team and talking about, building different jackets and things. And I try explaining, for me, hearing a moose grunt is the very first moose grunt is super important, right? So that allows me to basically set up, and it'll dictate the outcome of this hunt. Well, if the material on my hat is rubbing on the material on my collar just from me simply moving my head to try to listen, and it's creating that ambient noise, that's a problem for me. So I need to have very quiet gear when I'm hunting the rut, because I need to hear that very faint moose grunt in order to set up and put ourselves in a position to be successful. As minute and small as the material of my hat and collar is, it's crucial to the hunt.
Dude, I know that pain so well. And it's similar with elk, right? I'll, let out a cow call or bugle or whatever, and then I'm going to sit there and listen for 5 minutes. And my hearing is not all that great as it is. I've been around guns and tanks and explosions for a long time, and I need to really be able to listen. So if I call and then my client is right next to me, like opening up a fruit snack or shuffling around his feet or, doing the river dance on some pine cones, it sends me thermonuclear right now. And I'll like try and run away from them. Like if you need to make all that noise, just do it over there. And then they'll come follow you. And it's like, oh gosh, like, how do I be polite and tell you to like, stop moving?
Right. That's funny. That hits home for me, because I've been in that boat. Like I'm to the point now, having done it for this long, to tell them when I stop, do what you need to do. Whenever I'm calling, that's quiet time in the we'd be quiet when that happens. It's funny. It sounds like out west and back east, it's all the same world. We're doing all the same things.
Yeah. Just a little bit different venue, but a lot of similarities.
Yeah, no doubt. Good stuff.
Well, Dustin, how can people follow you and follow what you're doing?
So I'll tell you, James, like I said, I was highly motivated at the conclusion of my experience at the Hunter Games, talking to yourself, talking to a lot of the guys that were competitors there with regard to social media. Right now, we are on Facebook, Northern New England Outfitters and Guides. We have a website, northernnewoutfitters.com, but we are in the process of creating Instagram and a YouTube channel. I think we're going to go the route of hiring someone to manage that for us. And, the only way I can explain it is that's probably our biggest mistake as a business. We have this content and amazing video and pictures and experiences, and we have failed to share it with other people. And that is our fault. So keep an eye out in the future for us. We're gonna try to get out there and meet the rest of the world here in the real short distance here. We'll see how it goes.
Well, that sounds good, man. And once you kind of get that stuff up and running, let me know and I'll help you with it. Help you with anything I can. And, if I can do any aspect of my job right, you're going to be charging like 3 times as much for bear hunts in a couple of years as you are right now.
Awesome. I hope so. I appreciate it.
All righty, sir. Well, look, stay safe out there. Again, thank you so much for your service as a law enforcement officer and for leading your men the way you do. And thank you very, very much for coming out and representing SIG and doing such a good job as a safety officer out at the Hunter Games. It's really cool to get to meet you. And I'm really looking forward to the days when you and I get to hunt together on your side of the country or mine.
Awesome. Thanks, James. I appreciate the opportunity.
Cheers.
Stay
buddy.
well. Take care.
I live in an old cabin with bad to non-existent insulation and wood heat. That cabin can see snow every month of the year and needs a good amount of firewood stacked in the woodshed to carry through the colder months. This spring, as my woodpile turned to smoke and ash, I noticed something metal pushing out of the decades of sawdust and bark. I kicked at it and unearthed a Stanley thermos. The cup was missing, and it showed more worn stainless steel than green. There were dents in the metal, and the handle looked like a puppy had chewed on it, but it still hadn't leaked the old coffee I could feel slosh inside. It took me back to memories of cutting firewood with my dad, waking up early for an elk hunt, or going out to the canyons to gather cattle. A Stanley thermos has the durability to survive whatever hard work you throw at it. You may find it carries memories as well as coffee. Learn more about their new and classic line of products at stanley1913.com or at your local sporting goods store. And catch you next week.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and share the show with a friend. You can also rate the podcast and leave a review. Your support allows me to keep doing what I love, which is meeting incredible folks and sharing their stories with you. For more content and photos, follow the show on Instagram at 6 Ranch Podcast or me at 6 Ranch Outfitters. This episode was produced by Emily Brannigan, with original music written and performed by Justin Hay. Art for the 6 Ranch Podcast was created by John Chatelain and digitized by Celia Christofferson. Tune in every Monday for a brand new episode of the 6 Ranch Podcast. I'll catch you next week.